Resolving Conflicts at Work, a conversation with Jeanette Bicknell of Bicknell Mediation. That is our topic for today. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact-dependent. Hey everyone, this is Mac Pialui, attorney, mediator, arbitrator, working throughout Florida and Texas, and I'm back in Toronto, Canada, where we are doing LMI Podcast on the Road. Welcome back, and today we have another episode where we're talking to Jeanette Bicknell. But of course, my co-host for this sub-series is Thomas Giglione, mediator extraordinaire, trainer, and all-around guru in all things conflict resolution. Thomas, how are you doing?
Great. We're here in Toronto now, in front of Casa Loma with Jeanette Bicknell of Bicknell Mediations. And thank you very much for this opportunity, Jeanette, to interview you. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us where you are, because where we are, because I understand you live nearby and you know more about this area.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I help people who don't get along work together effectively and respectfully, and I also assist employers with workplace investigations. We're here outside of Casa Loma, which is, I believe, they call it an architectural folly, around the turn of the 19th century. It was built by a rich man who wanted to have an outrageous place to live and have his guests. It's worth the trip. It's very interesting. Now there's a restaurant inside, and special events are held there, concerts and so forth.
The last time I was here, it was a grade 7 trip. I'm originally from Hamilton, Ontario, and we spent a whole day here, and that's the last time I was here.
Well, no, Thomas, thank you so much for bringing me here and for introducing me to Jeanette. And we kind of asked Thomas, hey, could you bring us to sites where people might recognize Toronto so that they know that we are at a certain landmark. Exactly. So again, I appreciate it. It's been a very wonderful time to kind of learn the area and find out more about it, and to meet people like Jeanette who do the work that we love so much, which is mediation, conflict resolution. So let's get started. So Thomas, you got the first question.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Jeanette, dealing with understanding workplace conflict. The changing nature of workplace investigations. DEI training is facing more backlash recently, more than ever, and workplace laws are constantly evolving. Have you noticed a dramatic shift in the types of workplace conflicts being investigated today? And what's one surprising workplace issue that's suddenly become more common?
Okay, thanks. So I can't say that I've noticed a big shift in the kinds of complaints that are coming forward. Whether or not DEI training is in fashion or not, employers have a responsibility to maintain a safe workplace and a workplace free of discrimination and harassment. One thing I have noticed is that after some kind of DEI training, people often do come forward with complaints and with issues and with questions, because now they know what to do, right? They know what to do if they have a complaint or an issue or feel discriminated against. So it's empowering in that way. It doesn't always lead to an investigation. Many of these things can be resolved with mediation. One thing that I notice lately, as you know, Thomas, when we analyze conflict, we look at external factors as well. And I'm noticing that the stress of the world today and external factors, people are more on edge, and that leads to more conflict. So that's one thing I can say I've noticed.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So let's talk about now common workplace issues. If you had to name the top 3 reasons companies request workplace investigations, what would they be? And what's the most complex cases you've ever had to resolve?
So the number one thing I would say, well, 2, is allegations of bullying, allegations of mistreatment either by supervisors or by colleagues. and discrimination, unfair treatment. And the most complex case I ever did involved 5 complainants against one responding party and a total of 72 allegations.
Wow. And it was resolved?
Well, I completed the investigation. Some of the allegations were substantiated, some were not, and then it's handed back to the employer and they decide what happens next. And I made recommendations, so hopefully a similar incident would not arise in the future.
Understood. Thomas?
Yes. Let's go to the topic of recognizing the early signs of conflict. I love your blog post, by the way. I read all your blogs.
Thanks.
And I learned a lot, so it's very informative. You have a PhD, right?
I do,
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. It's a PhD in philosophy, and I taught philosophy for about 10 years. And when it was time for a career change, I'd learned about alternative dispute resolution when I was a graduate student. And at the time I thought, maybe I can make this part of my life someday. And so that was kind of the catalyst.
Yeah, because the research reading your blog, I could see the academia, and it was well researched. And one of the things that you in your blog post, you have one entitled "Signs of Workplace Conflict." You mentioned absenteeism and gossip as early warning signs. Can you share a story where these minor red flags, I don't know if they're minor, escalated into a full-blown crisis, and what leaders should have done differently to stop it early?
Well, I wish I could tell you that people read that blog and picked up the phone and called me, but
Really?
no, I wish I could tell you that.
Okay, I see.
But the reality is that, and maybe you found this too, people tend not to act until basically their house is on fire. They don't want to buy fire insurance.
Yeah.
They're gonna wait for the fire and then call someone. So
it's not preventative.
I wish it was, but no, I haven't found a lot of prevention. Maybe that goes on internally, and we never meet those people. But the people I meet, they didn't do the prevention or look for the early warning signs.
Yeah, that's one thing I get into is dispute resolution design, helping companies, design, systems where they might integrate an ombudsperson or, training HR and specific, skills that might be able to deal with things internally as in a preventative, ongoing education.
Right. Yeah.
Are you involved with education and training in your practice?
Not so much. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Mac, you have a question?
So when it comes to employer responsibilities under workplace law, now I'm a lawyer in Florida and Texas, so I don't know too much about workplace law, but I'm curious in Canada, in your home state or province of Ontario, many HR professionals believe they're handling workplace disputes legally until they're hit with a lawsuit. So what's the biggest legal mistake employers make under the Occupational Health and Safety Act or Ontario Human Rights Code, and what's an example of a case where that there might be a mistake that costs a company dearly?
So I think one of the biggest legal things we see, and this is usually if employers haven't gone to an employment lawyer to understand their responsibilities. Sometimes in the case law, we read of cases where the correct process wasn't followed. They weren't, the responding party didn't have a fair process. And there was a case not that long ago at the Canadian Border Services Agency, which is federally regulated. And the judge found that the complainant was not given a fair process because new evidence came up during the investigation, and the investigator didn't share it with the principal party, the party who brought the complaint. So much so that the report cited evidence from a witness who turned out wasn't even there. So that has, I think that's really focused everybody on the importance of a process that's fair to everyone.
I'd like to touch on neutrality. And, as a mediator myself and also a mediation coach and trainer, I always stress on the importance of maintaining neutrality, even, perceived biases, body language and all the rest of it. But, mediators and, workplace investigators, we're all human. Emotions run high in these situations. Bias creeps in. We can't really help that. How do you personally keep your neutrality intact, even, directly and indirectly, and especially in cases where one side's story is far more compelling than the other?
So that's a great question. Thanks for asking. So one of the things that I do is when I'm writing a report, I have it in my mind that everybody's going to read this report. I mean, even though it's not, even though they may not, depending on the situation, I just write it as though everyone is going to read it, who I'm writing about, and that kind of keeps me honest and makes sure I'm fair to everybody, and makes me sure that I'm using solid arguments and assessing all of the evidence, and just making sure it's fair for everyone.
When you say you're writing it as if everybody's going to read it, who are you specifically?
The
parties, the employer,
the witnesses. The witnesses don't read it typically, but I'm to make me fair to everybody and give an honest account of what people said. I assume they're going to read it someday.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So let's talk about handling complex workplace dispute. Some workplace behaviors may not meet the legal threshold for harassment, but they still poison company culture. When you investigate these gray area cases, how do you decide where to draw the line?
So that's a great question, because as you say, there's sometimes a fine line between harassment and bad management, but at the end of the day, your best employees are going to leave, whether it meets the legal threshold or not. So it's important to resolve these. It's important to have an understanding of what's going on and to respond appropriately. So I guess it has to be on a case-by-case basis. And sometimes behavior might not meet the legal threshold, but it might violate the company's respect in the workplace policy. So that's something that can be pointed out. And I might suggest remedies such as coaching.
Okay. Yeah. And you are a coach yourself, right, to people who are looking for that kind of help?
Sometimes,
but I believe that's more Thomas's area.
Yeah, I'm more involved with training and, workplace training and mentoring, and also dispute resolution designed to put in built-in preventative measures, so you're not just putting out fires, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I thought I saw coaching on your website. That's why I had brought it up.
A little bit. Yeah.
I don't know if this is true or not, or if you could agree with this, but workplace investigation might be a little bit disruptive to an organization, in that, after investigation, some trust might be shattered and teams may feel divided. Can you share a case where you helped restore workplace relationships post-investigation, and what strategies actually worked in those cases? Because, we're in there trying to do good, and, it's, like a surgeon sometimes, you might get into complications, and you have to, restore, do some restorative work to build the trust back.
Yeah, that's certainly a big issue. I did some work with a nonprofit where there'd been an investigation. It was a small nonprofit. It had been the investigation was quite divisive. People felt very vulnerable. And they happened to have coming in a new executive director. And she was great. And she really made it clear that she supported both. She was supporting everybody. She's supporting both the complainant and the respondent. And she worked with them both. I worked with them to kind of together. So there was the work that I did with them, but having the backup and the supplement of the executive director, because, I'm not there I can't be there all the time, right? People don't want me there all the time. I don't want to be there all the time. So you need somebody internal who's going to help to maintain those relationships.
Just to clarify, as mediators and workplace investigators, we kind of have a quasi Hippocratic oath that we're in there not to do any harm. But after the investigation, there might be some issues that might linger, post workplace investigation. So just to let you know that, we're not in there to disrupt anything. We're there to, make the company work together and the teams better, and to hopefully reconcile some differences.
Yeah. And I usually suggest that employers only do an investigation if their lawyer has advised it. If the lawyer,
or they're mandated by law,
or
right?
when they're mandated by law. Sometimes a work assessment is a bit of a gentler process than an investigation, and an assessment can get people talking about how they want to improve their workplace together. Yeah.
I really want to touch on the prevention part, which I think is very important. I guess in our personal lives, we're all guilty of this, but we let things go, and then it builds up, and then all of a sudden you let out your frustrations, and in one bombshell type of outburst. Most companies don't act until the crisis hits, and just like happens in our personal lives sometimes. What's one proactive strategy that, if widely adopted, could drastically reduce the need for workplace investigations in the first place as a preventative measure?
So I can't stress enough the importance of leadership, and having leaders who not only kind of talk the talk, but they demonstrate respect for their workers and for one another. And that means hiring people who are gonna be able to do that. And it means when issues come up with people, to address them quickly. It doesn't have to be punitive. Doesn't mean you fire somebody, but you make sure that person understands the expectations of the workplace, the expectations for respectful behavior, and you get them the support they need to kind of bring their best self to work.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Because we have to remember we're dealing with people's careers, people's lives, their livelihood. Yeah. So it's a very, very important work that you do, Jeanette. And we're honored that we had the opportunity to talk to you about this. And we look forward to maybe doing some more podcasts with you. Because I believe in the United States, Mackie, we want to touch on this. Workplace investigations is kind of a new frontier.
So I actually had to Google workplace investigations from the Canadian perspective, because I was asking this to another gentleman earlier, what's the difference between that and ombuds, for example. But I understand you bring an impartial person, whether they're from the outside or they work for the company, in order to get to the allegations and try to resolve the disputes, especially when somebody is claiming that somebody harassed them or whatever. And because I don't do workplace law a whole lot, I do mainly family law in my own personal experience. That's why we bring people like you to talk about it. But LMI Podcast on the Road always likes to get perspectives from other jurisdictions, and definitely being here in Toronto has been very eye-opening, and not just in terms of your own law, but to see how different it is to mine. So in the future, I may have employment lawyers or mediators and conflict resolution specialists from Texas or Florida, from other U.S. states, to discuss it, and then I can kind of compare and have a better idea. But this would be, I think, episode number 298. On this channel. And so there's bound to be another discussion on this from American perspective soon enough. Yeah. Okay, just wait for it.
We'll do that virtually, yes. Yeah, yes. Thanks again, Jeanette.
No, thank you for having me.
And Jeanette, before you go, if people want to contact you or follow up with you, what's the best place they can go to follow you and connect?
So my website is Bicknell .ca.
Yes. Remember .ca, that's Canadian. Okay.
Yeah, .ca. Not California.
Yes. Yeah, I'll make sure to put your website and all your bio information on the show notes so that people go to the blog post. LMIpodcast.com, guys. You can follow it. We'll get some clips from this over to the socials, and then people can follow and learn more. So thank you so much. It's Dr. Jeanette Bicknell.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to meet you.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Until next time. Take care, everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.